Today I'll be speaking to a hypnotherapist. Let me briefly introduce him before I bring him on. Craig Meriwether is a certified clinical hypnotherapist and founder of the Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. For over 12 years, he has helped clients overcome trauma, anxiety, and fear while improving confidence, performance, and emotional well-being. Trained at the prestigious Hypnotherapy Academy of America, Craig specializes in clinical and medical hypnosis, guiding individuals through deep subconscious healing and transformation. Hi, Craig. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, Dr. Nafisa, I really appreciate you inviting me.
So I'm excited to talk to you. I just did a brief introduction of your history, but can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in hypnotherapy and what brought you to doing what you're doing, and who do you help?
Yeah, it's really just struggling with my own anxiety and depression as I was growing up in my teenage years. And this is the 1980s. I graduated high school in 1985. So, there's no internet. We didn't even have the SSRI drugs, the Prozac. That didn't come out till late 1990s with those other style of drugs. And so really all you had in the 1980s, if you're struggling, was whatever book you could find at the library or the bookstore, or whatever psychotherapist you could find in the yellow pages, or maybe, get a referral from somebody if you were brave enough to ask somebody. But, teenagers probably not going to do any of those things. So it's really just something I struggled with, settled into, I guess. But as I grew older, moved into my 20s, it was something I really wanted to figure out, wanted to conquer, if you will. And the personal growth movement, the self-help movement really took an upswing in the 90s with Tony Robbins becoming super popular, and a lot of other authors and teachers in that realm. And so that's what I leaned towards. I'd done some talk therapy and, helpful in a way. It just never really seemed to be able to deal with the core issues of whatever it was. And that's kind of what sometimes the insidiousness of depression and anxiety. You just kind of don't know what the problem is. You just feel like this and you just want it to stop. And so I started doing more personal growth kind of stuff, following, the suggestions of Tony Robbins and other people. And one of the things that they always would say, like in their books and things, is, the programming of the subconscious mind. They talk about that. And so I was learning and growing, and this is kind of a slow drip, from the 80s into the 90s. In the late 90s, the Prozac and other drugs are coming out. And so the conversation around depression opened up. Oprah was talking about it, and other talk shows, and the internet is now out there in the late 90s. And there's forums and places you could reach out to other people. And so it wasn't shameful to talk about being depressed or anxious. You talk to your doctor about it now. And so this whole conversation opened up, and even more people talking about depression, anxiety, and a lot of the books and articles, blog posts, sometimes they would have the 5 things you could do to change your life. And 4 of them would always kind of be different, but there was always one that was always the same. It was hypnotherapy. And a lot of these people I was following that I liked, their books, I liked what they were saying. They were saying hypnotherapy is one of the ways to help reprogram the mind, change behavior patterns, habits, things like that. And so I started using it in the early 2000s. Again, this is a slow drip. We're talking some 15, 16, 17 years at this point. So this is a slow drip of trying to find ways of healing and of change. And hypnotherapy was one of the great, hypnotherapy is like an umbrella term for a lot of different techniques and tools. But in terms of helping me release and let go of a lot of the hurt and pain I was struggling with, hypnotherapy was a great resource, a great way to help me move forward. And as I moved forward in life, I just was so fascinated by it, fascinated by consciousness and healing and the subconscious mind. And eventually, later in life, I pivoted. I had the opportunity to train at a really wonderful school, the Hypnotherapy Academy of America. And this is a great school. You go there, you sit in a classroom with 25, 30 other people, and you learn about the scientific validity behind these techniques. And you maybe see a demonstration at the front of class, and then you go and break up into small groups and you practice with each other. This is 500 hours over about 2.5 months. And this is 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. It's really intensive training. This isn't just like a history class at university, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Fridays. Plus, you're getting together to do small group work on the weekends and homework and all that stuff. And so he walked away with like 500 hours of this great training and helping people using subconscious mind. So that's a kind of a brief journey of 20, 25 years of my own investigation, my own search for healing, and working with hypnotherapy in my own life to training on how to help other people with their own hurt and pain.
Yeah, we have a similar trajectory in that. And like you said, before the internet, it was a slow drip and we didn't have the resources. And so the healing took longer. For me, I also struggled with anxiety and was trying to find answers as to what was going on, and read a ton of self-help books and studied psychology, and just kind of kept going until I peeled that onion layer by layer, trying to overcome my own anxiety. So yeah, I mean, people just don't understand how things were back then. It wasn't just instant search Google and the answers are there for you. And so, but hypnotherapy has always fascinated me because there is a lot of myths and misunderstandings about it. I know that there's that neuro-linguistic programming and your subconscious mind, and those are things that are more acceptable. But talk a little bit about some of the myths and why some people are really afraid to do hypnotherapy.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because this is such a great set of tools to help people heal themselves, really. I don't fix anybody, and hypnotherapy in and of itself doesn't fix anybody. You fix yourself. That's the strength and the power of your own subconscious mind. But unfortunately, due to movies and TVs, there's a lot of, like you said, myths and misconceptions, one of which being the whole control thing, and it's brainwashing and mind control. And unfortunately, it's the exact opposite. I can't control anybody. I can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. A great example is this smoking. One of the most famous things hypnotherapy works with is helping people to quit smoking. And I can't make somebody quit smoking. I can't go into Las Vegas bars and casinos and just make people quit smoking, even though I know it's going to be healthier for them. They know it's going to be healthier for them. If they don't want to quit smoking, they're not going to quit smoking. That's why, just like, a spouse, a wife or a husband, make the appointment. I'm tired of him or her smoking and the money and the smell and the health implications later on. This is ridiculous. They're going to stop smoking now. Well, if they don't want to stop smoking, it doesn't matter how many sessions we do. If they don't want to stop smoking, they're not going to stop smoking. Otherwise, I'd be able to, go into prisons and hypnotize everybody to be law-abiding, upstanding citizens. I'd shut down the prison industry. I could hypnotize my way into the United Nations right now and hypnotize everybody to stop war. And I'd be the guy who ended war on Earth. But I can't do that because they don't want us to quit smoking. They don't want that change. And so I can't make them change. So really it's about your control. And even that aspect of, maybe some of your listeners have even done hypnosis at some point in their life. And I say, well, it didn't work and I can't be hypnotized. I'm one of those 15 or 20% that can't be hypnotized. That's not a thing. That's not a real thing. The academics like to talk about how there are people who can't be hypnotized. Well, they couldn't be hypnotized with them in that scenario, in that situation, in that room, over that Zoom call with that particular person. They didn't feel comfortable. And so they took their control and said, no, I'm not being hypnotized with this person or in this situation or this scenario. And they took control and said they shut it down, because nobody can make you do anything you don't want to do. This whole thing of let's hypnotize Jason Bourne to go assassinate the prime minister, that's not a thing. It's great for movies, great for TV shows, but everybody can do this work, because really it's this altered state of consciousness called hypnosis. It's really just brainwave state. And our brainwave states move up and down all day long. This is that thing, you're in a meeting at work, you're back in high school math class. You're driving home from work or picking up the kids or the store or whatever. You're heading home and you're 5 blocks away from home. You start thinking about, oh, the weekend, I got people coming over, I got family coming over, or I got that big project due on Friday, or the meeting I'm going to run on Thursday. And all of a sudden you find yourself in your driveway or your garage or your parking spot, and you don't remember the last 5 or 6 blocks. Well, your mind drifted off. You moved yourself into a hypnosis state. You've altered your state of consciousness just driving home. You know how to drive home. If you've lived there several years, you've driven home 1,000 times. 365 days a year, certainly you've driven home thousands of times. And so you know how to drive home. Your subconscious mind took over that part of your life in that moment, just like it knows how to tie your shoes and walk down the street and zip up your jacket and ride a bicycle, all that stuff. You don't have to think about that stuff. So your mind drifted away, floated away to another issue. Maybe you start remembering, oh, that vacation we took last summer, that was so much fun. You've altered your state of consciousness. You put yourself into hypnosis. Watching TV and your mind drifts off. You put yourself in hypnosis. Bored in a high school math class. You put yourself in hypnosis. So you can do it. So it's just a matter of, what we're going to do is do it on purpose in terms of a hypnotherapeutic session. And so the main misconception is just control. It's like, this isn't a way of taking away control from you. We're going to give you back control. Because a lot of people come because of anxiety or depression or anger or resentment or overwhelm or worry. You're already out of control because this anxiety or this fear just kind of pops up. You might not even know why. It sounds like you're already out of control. What hypnotherapy is going to do is give you back that control by understanding why that's happening, resolving the issue, and needing to amend and edit some sort of the computer programming, the safety protocols you put in, maybe as a child, even unconsciously. You can change those. You're the one who put them in there, maybe unconsciously. But you can change this stuff. You can take back control. And that whole thing with, like the shows, the Las Vegas shows, the hypnotist shows, where people are up on stage and they're dancing like Michael Jackson or singing like Elvis Presley or, barking like dogs, quacking like ducks. Every single person that got up on that stage volunteered to be up there. Nobody's making them go, oh, maybe they lost a bet. But I'll probably guarantee you they're going to get removed from the stage because they're not going to be a good candidate. They're going to be nervous and anxious and upset that they're up on stage in front of all these people. They're going to be excused from the stage. Everybody who's up there that does a show wants to be up there doing a show. They want a funny video to put on Instagram. They want to act silly in front of their friends. They just want a good time. They want to be the star of the show. And after the show, they all have a big smile on their face. And who's that hypnotist going to pick? You come out on stage, welcome to the show, and we're going to have a good time. And who are they going to pick to be up on stage? The introvert at the back of the room, sitting in the shadows, sinking down in their chair? Or are they going to pick the extrovert who got there early to sit in the front row, is jumping up and down saying, pick me, pick me, pick me? Of those two people, one of them is going to do a better show. And so this isn't about making people do ridiculous things. If you want to do ridiculous things, do ridiculous things. That's your life. That's how we have fun. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. Other people like to go salsa dancing. Other people like to hike out in nature. You do you, but you can't make somebody do anything they don't want to do. And so it's the exact opposite of the myth. This isn't taking away control. This is actually giving you back control of your life.
I'm so glad you clarified that, because there are a lot of misconceptions. But the fact is that we're operating for the majority of our day with subconscious programming that we picked up probably at the age of 4 or 5 years old. Now, does hypnotherapy allow us to access our subconscious mind a lot faster because we're in an altered state? And can we change our habits quicker because of that? Is that the goal of it, or am I totally off base here?
There's kind of two parts to it. Hypnotherapy can work very quickly. So you're correct in that way, because, and again, it's not that I'm fixing anybody or I have some magic wand and I tap people on the head 3 times and everything's changed. It's because you're able to access your subconscious mind. It's your subconscious mind. You're allowed. It's just that a lot of that stuff is just within the unconscious. We don't have to think about it. Just like, again, walking down the street or digesting your food or beating your heart, or if you have a cut on your finger or a scrape on your knee, you don't have to think about that stuff. Subconscious mind's taking over all that stuff. conscious awareness only represents a small portion of the entirety of mind. And I know there's now this conversation about it's just mind, it's not conscious or unconscious. But just from, I think in terms of this conversation, there's this aspect of mind we are unaware of, and it's holding on to hurt and pain, not to make your life miserable, but to protect you, because it doesn't want to experience it again. So like if it's using the instructions maybe set up by a child on how to keep you safe, but you're allowed to change it. You're the one who set it up. But imagine what you can do with the wisdom and the knowledge and the understanding of an adult, as opposed to a frightened, traumatized child. And so a lot of these programs we're operating with to keep ourselves safe, we're set up, probably unconsciously through traumatic event, but and as a child. But you're the one who set them up. And it's not to say it's your fault. It certainly wasn't fair. And it's not to blame the victim. But it actually becomes very empowering, because if you're the one who set them up, you're the one who can change them. And in terms of, my personal kind of philosophy theory of this is change happens in an instant. Now, there may be some steps, some lead up to that change, but change itself happens in an instant, just like the trauma can happen in an instant. And so if you can install it pretty instantaneously, why wouldn't you be able to heal and resolve those issues instantaneously? Now, having said that, there's an aspect of being human that what you practice, you get better at. And so the kind of part two of this work, certainly there's the part one where we can do some deep healing work and a few sessions of hypnotherapy. And generally what I tell people when I talk with them over the phone, we do a consultation call, or or a Zoom call, or send emails back and forth, is generally what I'm telling people is, 3 or 4 or 5 sessions. And that's mainly just to understand that this isn't going to be long-term 80, 90 sessions over 2 years, like maybe talk therapy. And not to disparage talk therapy, but just, that I think people have an idea and maybe even the experience of like talk therapy can take a bit of time, because that person you're sitting across from or doing the Zoom session with, they're there to analyze and to understand you and get to know you. Well, you already know you. You know what the problem is. And more importantly, you know what the answer is. And that's why hypnotherapy can act in a faster way. I don't want to say everything's a one and done, or it only takes 2 sessions or so, but people, once they get to hypnotherapy, there's a desire for change that is so great, because let's face it, hypnotherapy is at the bottom of the list. And people come to hypnotherapy because there's no more hope. They've done pretty much everything else, and they're still hurting. They're still in pain. And they read about hypnotherapy. They read a book, or they heard a podcast. They saw a video or something. And they said, well, I guess I'll try hypnotherapy. I have nothing else to lose. I have nothing else to try. And by accessing those parts of mind where the hurt is being stored, maybe like a file in a filing cabinet, you can resolve that issue in a way that is healthy for you and healing. And it doesn't need to take months and months and months. Healing can happen in an instant. Again, there may be some lead up to that healing, but generally what I tell people is like 4 or 5 sessions, because one, I want them to understand this isn't going to take years and years, 80, 90 sessions every week for 2 years, but you're allowed to create this healing change. And generally by the time seemingly people get to hypnotherapy, they're so ready for the change. They're ready to do the healing work.
How similar is hypnotherapy to EMDR or tapping, where we are accessing our subconscious mind?
Very, very different in that EDMR, and that's where you're moving the eyes around while relating or going through a traumatic event. Very, very healing. People have had great success with that. And this is the thing. There are a lot of tools in the toolbox, right? And it's not that one is better than the other. It's just like what people need in that time, in that instant. People have great success with EDMR. Other people's like, I just seem to be going through a traumatic event and just made it worse. There is not one size fits all. right? So that's why there's all sorts of incredible tools to use. EMR is very interesting because one aspect of why they think that works is because as you you're rolling your eyes around. I don't know if you can see this on the video, but if you roll your eyes around and move them up and move them down, move to the left, to the right, and one aspect of that is the bilateral stimulation a person is creating, as well as stimulating the vagus nerve. And this is a whole different conversation. There's a whole podcast in and of itself, both those things, bilateral stimulation and vagus nerve. But really quickly, bilateral stimulation, when somebody's feeling anxious or worried or in fear or in panic, they're lighting up a part of the right side of the brain. And so a lot of the energy gets pulled into there. This brain of ours, this storage house of the skull, can only hold so much blood supply and oxygen and energy and nutrients and fuel. And so it gets absorbed into this part to run this panic and this anxiety. So by doing bilateral stimulation, meaning both sides of the body, like here's my squeezy ball, passing the ball back and forth, moving the body like this, I now have to operate in these different parts of the brain, both hemispheres, because right side of the brain is controlling left side of the body, left side of the brain is controlling right side of the body. So as I move the body or like pass a pen back and forth or drum on my knees, if you ever remember somebody in school or at meeting at work and somebody's like up on their knees, it's bilateral stimulation. Spin class, walking. These are forms of bilateral stimulation. One of the reasons exercise and walking and things feels good, one reason, is that's bilateral stimulation. You're moving left foot, left foot. And so you're operating these different both hemispheres of the brain and different parts of the brain. So it pulls away that energy because you have to move your body. So that's bilateral stimulation. As you move your eyes back and forth, up and down, all sorts of directions, it's bilateral stimulation while you're going through that traumatic event. So you're decreasing the emotional component on that event is the theory. Anyway, the other aspect is the vagus nerves attached to the eyes. Vagus nerve is a big part of the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation response, sympathetic stress response, parasympathetic relaxation response. So as you move the eyes around, you can stimulate the vagus nerve, therefore activate the parasympathetic while you're going through this traumatic event or remembering it, reliving it, and therefore turning down the volume on the emotional component to it. So that's EDMR. And there are components that you can use. Again, hypnotherapy is an umbrella term. So there's components of moving your body and having a more somatic experience with some of the hypnotherapy techniques, like removing, like literally grabbing the hurt and the pain as a big red blob in your chest and pulling it out. So there's some somatic experiences to it as well, to some of the hypnotherapy techniques. Emotional freedom technique is a little bit different. That's more based on acupuncture and the energy system as taught by traditional Chinese medicine. Again, that could be a whole 3-hour conversation. It's very fascinating, very interesting. But the idea around it was created, sort of developed by Dr. Robert Callahan back in 1980. And he was working with a patient of his. He's a psychotherapist. He's passed away, but he was a psychotherapist. And in 1980, he was working with a patient of his who had a deep fear of water, so much so she had a panic attack every time it rained. And so they're at his home office because he has a swimming pool, or had a swimming pool at this home he was at. And in the living room, he's having her walk towards the sliding glass door. There's your disassociation, and towards the swimming pool. And she'd get really nervous and afraid, and they'd calm that down, and then walk towards the swimming pool, and she'd get really nervous and afraid, and they calm her down. And she's getting towards the sliding glass door, and she says, I'm so nervous. I'm so afraid I'm going to throw up. I'm going to vomit all over this place. And Dr. Callahan, it's clients in distress, patients in distress. He knew a little bit about acupuncture. Of course, he's not going to stick his client with needles or anything. Not that he had needles lying around, but he knew that this point right here underneath the eye, right on the eye socket, on the bone, it's a acupuncture point related to the stomach meridian. And we have these meridians, these channels all over the body of this life energy, this chi, just like blood that flows through the arteries and veins of our body. We have energy that flows through these kind of channels and meridians. We knew this was attached to the stomach meridian, according to acupuncture. So he had her tap on it. Bone conducts sound wave. Those cochlear implants, they're on the side of the head. They're not in the ear. the microphone's on the side of the head because the microphone is going to pull in the sound wave through the skull, and then the brain's going to translate that into audio. So bone conducts a sound wave, conducts a shock wave. So he's having her tap on both sides and talk about what she was going through. Oh, I'm so nervous about water. I'm so tired of it. It's exhausting. I'm just tired of feeling this way. Now I'm so upset. I'm nauseous. I'm going to throw up. She did this for about 10 minutes. And after calming down, and Dr. Callahan's like, okay, well, how are you feeling now? She says, well, my nausea is gone, and so is my fear of water. And so this fascinated Dr. Callahan. And so he started researching more and learning more about acupuncture. And after some time and some putting together different aspects of the work he does and acupuncture, he developed a system called thought field therapy, TFT. And so it was a very complicated system, still out there. People still use it. People still study it and use it. And it's this system of tapping and doing EMDR, kind of rolling your eyes around as you're talking about the issue that you're working on. And he has these big, huge, back in the day anyway, he had these big, huge folders like these New York City phone books of all the different algorithms of just like acupuncture. Well, if this is the issue, then you tap this series of spots. If it's that issue, you tap this totally different series of spots. And is expensive training, but he got great results from it. In 1990, Gary Craig, who is a hypnotherapist and a neurolinguistic programming expert and a Stanford engineer, he went to one of the trainings and he's just like, God, this is so complicated. I wonder if there's, being a Stanford engineer, I wonder if there's an easier way of designing this. And so he created EFT, which is just 12 points that you tap on while you're talking about the issue, right? And he just gave it to the world, and that's why I don't even think it's copyrighted or trademarked or anything like that. He's just like, and here's this great system, go use it. That was back in 1990. And so after 35 years, you go on YouTube, and so there's all sorts of videos, probably millions of videos at this point of EFT. Various variations of it. Now there's faster EFT and it's only 5 points and all sorts of things. These are all things that can be used within hypnotherapy. I don't know that you'd call EFT hypnotherapy because in and of itself, you're not really moving into an altered state of consciousness. You're just using this very somatic, obviously, very kinesthetic and physical therapy and talking about. So it kind of has all these aspects of acupuncture, bilateral stimulation, because you're using both sides if you want, as well as talking about, so a talk therapy aspect to it. And it can be very helpful. I use EFT in some of the work I do if I feel people would benefit and they seem interested in learning more about it. I teach it to them. Certainly bilateral stimulation can be a big part of the work too. Just in terms of like exercise, just holding yourself. I mean, this is in and of itself binaural stimulation, but also, giving yourself this healing, loving touch creates this binaural stimulation as well as floods of the brain with oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. So there's lots of different aspects of healing work. They can all work together. So you could do a session, where you start off with some hypnotherapy techniques, do some deeper healing trauma work with that incorporates EMDR, and then wrap it all up with EFT. All these things can work together, just like a toolbox. You need hammers, you need screwdrivers, you need wrenches, you need a socket wrench set, all of these things. And so it's not that one is better than the other, or one, do this, but don't do that. It just kind of depends on the person. There's 8 billion of us in the world. And there's not kind of one size fits all. And even if somebody's dealing with a certain similar issue, you know this, you've worked with this yourself, just because in and of itself, the symptom is the same. Like, let's say, like fear of flying. Okay, that's a pretty, general issue, but the reasoning behind that person being afraid of flying may be different. Therefore, it may require different tools in order to create resolution. Like one person I worked with once, they'd been flying for 30 years for business and vacations and traveling and adventures. And then one bad turbulent episode over the Atlantic, and it's like, oh, yeah, I'm done. I'm not doing that again. That was horrifying. That was so frightening. But they still needed to do it for work, for their career. I worked with somebody else who never been to an airport, never even been on a flight. But some people of a certain age will remember that horrible plane crash in San Diego back in '79, I think it was. And a 747 crashed into a neighborhood before making the runway in Lindbergh Field. And this couple lived right near the crash site, like blocks away. Their house wasn't affected, but they were right there. And their daughter hadn't been born yet, but a year or two later, they had their daughter, and they talked about it for like 10 years. Oh, that plane crash, it was so awful. And it was just the war zone. And her fear of flying came from her parents talking about that awful, awful plane crash. Hadn't seen the plane crash. She hadn't ever been in an airplane, never been to an airport. But her fear of flying came from having these important people in her life talk about the horror of that situation. So in itself, it's fear of flying. But these are two different reasonings behind it. And so that's where hypnotherapy and talk therapy and a lot of these other things come in very handy. It's like, okay, well, you want to work on the core issue. The symptom is fear of flying. The symptom is the anxiety. The symptom is the cigarette smoking or the gambling or the whatever. But why is that happening? Because if you just deal with the gambling or the smoking or the drinking or the anxiety, it's just going to show up as something else, right? Well, it's not going to show up as anxiety anymore. It's going to show up as anger. Or you stop cigarette smoking, but now junk food is a problem, or gambling or whatever, scrolling or video games. Until you hit this core issue. And then again, it's like 8 billion people of humans here on Earth. There's not one size fits all. So it's sometimes a combination or a mismatch, or maybe hypnotherapy will work well, or maybe in this instance, EMDR will work well, or maybe talk therapy, do some hypnotherapy and talk therapy. It just kind of depends on, the person and what they need to work on.
Yeah, and I like what you said, like having a lot of tools in your toolbox and getting to the core issue, getting to the root cause of your problem. This is why I don't really like to diagnose anybody with anything, because it's about focusing on what is the symptom and why is that showing up for you.
Yeah.
And so some people hate the idea of having being diagnosed with OCD, for example, because of the word disorder. Well, they're like, I'm not disordered. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just my mind gets stuck every once in a while. And so I'm like, don't focus on the label. It's not about the label. It's about what's happening to your brain at that moment and how can we work on that and what's the root cause of that. But unfortunately, when it comes to insurance and record keeping, we have to have a diagnosis. But I don't want people to feel like they should focus too much on that diagnosis as an identifier, or don't cling to that too much and say, I have anxiety, I am this, I have depression. So anyway, I just wanted to also go back to another thought that I had about hypnotherapy. I've seen, and again, in the movies, where people can literally go back and identify their childbirth experience, like how they came out of the canal and their experience as a small little baby. Have you experienced that, and how true is that?
Yeah, that's really fascinating, because you'll run into situations where somebody's just like, I just can never finish a project. I get to the very end and then I just choke, or I just stop and I move on to something else. You find out that they're a C-section birth, or that the cord was wrapped around their neck and they choked or something. And it's really fascinating. And now we're getting into more of an aspect, though, of what was reality and what is a symbolic construct of the subconscious mind for healing. And, it's an interesting conversation. And again, there's probably a 3-hour podcast right there and talking about that aspect of it. But, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and Milton Erickson and Laura Fitz Pearls, and so many people have talked about how the subconscious mind's language is symbolism and metaphor and allegory and dreams and imagination, and that we can also speak back to the subconscious mind with symbolism and metaphor and allegory and storytelling and imagination. That's why some of the techniques of hypnotherapy are very imaginative, very mythological, very, very metaphoric and very symbolic, like, in terms of releasing and letting go of some anxiety. Okay, I'm going to a beautiful healing place, and there's this waterfall, blue healing energy, and it washes away like mud after a day of working in the garden, washes away all the stress and anxiety, but it also moves through you, through your brain and through your throat and in through your heart and lungs, washing away all the stress and tension. Now, is there really a waterfall somewhere of blue healing energy that's going to wash away the stress in your brain and your heart and your lungs and your... No. But symbolically, you can use that because the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. That's why a nightmare feels so scary. Anybody listening has ever had a nightmare before? Maybe your kids have had nightmares, or, it could be something super realistic. A veteran having a post-traumatic stress disorder nightmare about being on the front lines, even though the war for them was 30, 40 years ago. Or it could be something super ridiculous, like a cheeseburger is chasing down the street, throwing coconuts at your head. It's ridiculous. It's never going to happen. But the mind thinks you're in danger. In both scenarios, the person's sound asleep in bed, safe and comfortable. But the mind thinks you're in danger. It'll turn on the stress response to armor you, to protect you, even in deep sleep. Brain creating adrenaline, cortisol, heart racing to get it to the big muscle of your arms and legs, to power your immune system and digestive system, turning down so that energy can get to your big muscles to fight and escape. All because of cheeseburgers chasing on the street. So we can use that to our benefit, to our advantage. Through thought alone, you can change your physiology, even if it's a ridiculous thought, like a cheeseburger chasing on the street, or there's a waterfall of blue healing energy. So in terms of this work, I don't think one could ever prove it unless there's medical records or mom remembers or something, what happened at birth. But even the feeling states of somebody going through the birth canal, real or imagined, it's an emotional issue for them. And so we can use this, whether symbolic or real, we can use this symbolic healing of these hypnotherapeutic techniques to create a metaphoric healing. Obviously, we can't go back in time, like Back to the Future and Michael J. Fox and Back to the Future, and go back in time and deal with that. But we can use symbolic and metaphoric constructs of the subconscious mind to create healing. And whether real or imagined, really doesn't matter one way or the other, because they're having an emotional issue, emotional reaction, or emotional response to some issues in life that may be related, at least in their imagination, to something from birth. So that's what we work on. We're not here to analyze. We're not here to diagnose or prescribe or figure it out, whether it's real or not real. It's, well, I have some anxiety and some fear because when I was born, the cord was wrapped around my neck and I felt like I wasn't breathing, and now I just can't move forward in life. Okay, that's what we work on. I don't need to check medical records or call mom and see if that really happened, or call the doula or anything. It's like, okay, well, if that's what is the issue, then that's the issue we work on. And let's go back and do some maybe regression work, maybe in a symbolic way, maybe in a more metaphoric way, but using the constructs and the patterns set up by the subconscious mind. Let's create healing around it. And so have done work like that. It's fascinating beyond belief in and of itself. Even like the more spiritual work, it's like, I couldn't prove it one way or another, but here are the results. And the results are, they no longer have a problem, So, I don't know. It's really fascinating. The mind is extraordinary. And one of the aspects of this is like the person you're working with, they know what the problem is. And more importantly, they know what to do about it. And so a lot of this is just asking questions. Well, what does the child need? well, they just never got loved and they never got supported or encouraged. Okay, then give the child love, support, and encouragement, whatever that means to you. And they know what that means. I want you to give that child that's standing in front of you all that love and encouragement and support that child never got. Let's spend 10, 15 minutes with that. Now, is there a child right there? Of course not. They're 50 years old. They're 45 years old. They're on a Zoom session with me. They're sitting in my office. There's obviously no 8-year-old child or 5-year-old child there, but they can pretend and they can imagine and they can create great resolution and great healing through that. So it's extraordinarily fascinating, the ability of the human being, of all of us, to find resolution, find healing, even though the healing methodology may be a little fantastical. It's like, well, that's the language of the subconscious mind. So why not use the tools you've been given? Here's the manual on how this all works. So
it's amazing. I mean, they say the next frontier for us to discover or experiment or explore is the mind, because there's so much we don't know about it, and it is so powerful and so amazing, and it does communicate in symbols, and there's so much we don't have. Like, our brain does lie to us, because we might have programmed a lie at an age of 4 or 5 because we didn't have the full awareness of what was going on, and we operate on that system until we get older, and then we can recreate that scene and implement a different image, and that can actually lead to our healing, and that's just incredible.
I have a great story about that really quickly, because I know we're kind of running up against time, but real quickly, one of my compadres that I was training with at the Hypnotherapy Academy of America. And this is real school. We're there in class, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Fridays for 2.5 months. So you get to know people, and we get up there and we learn about the scientific validity behind this work, and then we see a demonstration at the front of class. Then we break up into small groups and we work with each other in the evenings and on weekends and all this stuff. And so one of the as we're learning more about the regression side of this work and the reversal of trauma that may have occurred during childhood, one of the people that got up, she was in her 70s. She's doing this as kind of like retirement, but she wanted to get back and learn about this healing work. And so she's in her 70s. And one of the issues she got is that her piano teacher, because she didn't play piano anymore. She stopped playing piano. She wanted to play piano for her grandkids. It hurt her that she didn't have music in her life and she didn't play piano anymore, because she was great as a kid. But her piano teacher told her, she overheard her piano teacher tell her parents that she wasn't any good and that she couldn't teach her. And so she just stopped. It's like, well, that's it. I'm done. I'm never going to play. And it hurt her. For some 60 years, didn't play piano. But when doing this work, doing this regression work, when she returned to that conversation she overheard, she kind of opened up more of the conversation and heard that because she was so good, the piano teacher had no more to teach her, and she needed to go to another teacher. She could still teach a younger sister, because there's more I can teach her. But in terms of her, I'm tapped out. There's nothing else I can teach her. We're at the level that I'm at, that she can play at. So she needs to go to another, maybe go to find somebody at the university to teach this 10-year-old how to play. But she cut that part out, or she didn't hear that part or something. And so this one session in front of a classroom of people, she gained back her ability and love of music, because she's like, oh, it wasn't because I was terrible. It was because I was so good.
Wow.
And that's painful. It's hurtful, because she lost 60 years of being able to play piano and play music, because her mind as a child heard, I can't teach her anymore, and took that to, I must be awful and terrible. And that set up 60 years of her life. But if she understood the content, because she, again, hearing this conversation from another room as she was kind of eavesdropping, she didn't hear the second part of that. I can't teach her anymore because she's so good. And this is unfortunately, maybe an unfortunate aspect of being human.
Yeah.
But we pick this stuff up as kids.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not true. Now, in and of itself, her parents are dead. The piano teacher's probably not alive anymore. I don't know that you can go back and confirm any of that, even if her parents would remember that. It's like, I don't even remember you taking piano lessons, that kind of thing, because it was so long ago. But of course, her parents aren't alive anymore. The piano teacher probably isn't alive. So in and of itself, there's no way to confirm whether that happened or didn't happen. But in terms of what she needed to do to resolve this issue, did it really happen that way? Or is, again, that a construct of the subconscious mind to symbolically and metaphorically create a mythology so she can play piano again because she so desperately wants to play for her grandchildren? In and of itself, I don't know that it matters.
It doesn't.
I don't ever prove one way or another because all the evidence, all the people who were there are no longer with us. But the healing that happened allowed her to move forward in life. The mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So we use that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's about that because they've done studies with schools where they've literally told kids that weren't that successful academically, and they told them, wow, you're so smart, you're so capable, and then they end up going above and beyond expectation of what they thought they could do. And it's just whatever you believe, whether you think you can do it or you think you can't, both are true. Depends on which one you decide to believe.
Well, and an unfortunate aspect of that is also, the people around you, because in terms of that kind of research, they've also done it where they told the teacher that the special class of remedial students, they told the teacher they were genius students.
Yeah.
This is the AP class, and by the end of the year, they are all genius level students because the teacher believed it. Therefore,
and that's what's so amazing.
And so this is how I'm going to treat you.
Yeah.
And
that's what's so powerful and so amazing. And again, we can pick up lies as children because we don't have the full information and go from there and completely change the trajectory of our lives like this woman did with her piano playing. Yeah. Or we can actually go back and reinstill certain images and go back and change and fix that past. Like you said, we can't go back to the past, but we can fix what we believed and then move forward in a healthier way.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is why we don't want to go looking for trauma. That's a big issue because people may come and to say, I don't know, I feel like something happened just the way, my aunt and uncle talked about a situation. I just feel like something happened. I want you to regress me to find that trauma. It's like, absolutely, we'll not do that because the mind, if there is no trauma, the instructions to the mind is find some trauma.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of that false memory syndrome came in the 1980s and 1990s, is due to leading questions and to children sometimes. They came up with what they thought they wanted to hear, even though it wasn't true, and ruined a lot of people's lives. A lot of people went to jail because of false memories around abuse and things. And so you don't want to necessarily go searching for abuse. You want to start with that feeling state. Let's just work with the feeling state.
Yeah, where are you now? Yeah,
feeling state's being attached to the thought that's creating it, unconscious or conscious, and work with that. Not search for potentially hidden stuff because there may not be there. May be there, but it may not be. So, and that's the thing. It's like, how would you ever know? And while I think I was, somebody was attacked, it's like, well, how can you ever prove that? Yeah. And now, and that's where it gets really dicey. So we don't want to necessarily look for memories, but in terms of the thoughts around that feeling state and why they're being created, we work with that.
I'm so glad you brought that up too. And it's so amazing. Like all of this can be so helpful and so healing, but there's also the negative downside of somebody taking you down a path that they don't know what they're doing, and they might not intentionally want to mislead you, but like you said, the brain has a way of filling in the gaps in creating false narratives. And so I'm glad you did bring that up. This is such fascinating information. Where can people find you and connect with you and learn more about what you do?
Well, I do most of my work, as many of us do nowadays, over Zoom. The issues of the pandemic some years ago allowed us to move in this direction, and people find it really comfortable and safe to work from home. They don't have to drive across town, and so it's been really convenient to people. In fact, research shows that Zoom sessions, these virtual sessions over the computer, they work as well as in person. In fact, there's been some research that shows that Zoom sessions work better than in person, and whether it's psychotherapy, you know, that more talk therapy kind of work, or hypnotherapy, or a doctor's appointment, or relationship counseling, or life coaching, Zoom sessions work as well as, and maybe even work better than in person. So generally I work, you know, with people around the country and around the world. Strangely, I can list Iceland and Tahiti and Bulgaria as places I've worked with people in, but I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, up in the mountains. We get snow here in the wintertime. And the name of my practice is Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy, which is a mouthful, I know. But if you just go to Google, go to the Google machine, and you type in Flagstaff hypnosis, you'll see Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. And I'm happy to get on a phone call or a Zoom call or through email and discuss what it is you'd like to work on.
Are you on social media at all?
Sort of, kind of, not really. I am, but I'm not very good at it. And so I'm not on there a lot. And yeah, I have all the Instagram. I keep thinking, oh, I should put out a video, and that was like 3 weeks ago. So I don't know.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Thank you for joining us.
I really do. It's so wonderful to talk with somebody about this stuff and go in depth as we can. So I appreciate you inviting me here.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. Thanks again.